Members that meetings are recorded and will be made available to view on the webpage. Recording will be published within the next 24 hours, as always. Meeting etiquette: members are asked that if they would like to ask a question or be included in the conversation of the meeting, they must raise their hand. And as a reminder to put all members who are submitting their apologies for any meeting of the IJB, please ensure that they advise the chair of the meeting and the business support team of who will be substituting for them in the meeting to ensure they receive all necessary paperwork ahead of the meeting. And can I please also remind all report authors to assume that everyone has read the reports prior to the meeting and they are not required to provide a detailed update to the meeting. Thank you very much. So we get started with agenda item number 1, and that is welcome, apologies, and notification of substitute members. We do have formal apologies from Gareth, David Rowland, Pam Jameson, Stephen Morgan, Ken Donaldson, Callum McCall, and Anne Farrell. Do we have any other apologies not listed? Any notification of substitute members?
Other than Andy Ferguson, who we've just agreed that he was stepping for Linda forward.
Okay, that's fine. No problem. Thank you very much. So welcome everybody. In that case, I move us to item number 2, which is declarations of interest. Can I ask if anybody would like to declare any interest relating to the agenda today, please? Okay, no interest. Thank you. That moves us to the minutes of the IJB, which was held on the 24th of March 2026. If members please confirm they're happy to approve the minute. Are there any matters of accuracy first of all? Okay. And in that case, are any matters arising not covered on the agenda today? Okay. And in that case, I take it we are happy to approve the minutes as accurate. See people nodding, so thank you very much for that. Okay, moving us on to item number 4, which is the action list and rolling agenda matrix. And I can't see it properly. Sorry,
I can read it.
Thank you.
So we have a few still outstanding. I did an update on them last week. So a couple ongoing offices are aware of the complex care plan. Caroline did join the committee 2 weeks ago, and we'll be bringing in another update to the September committee, so we can actually, I think we agree that we'll close this one of the IJB matrix and action plan, and it'll move to the strategic planning, finance and commission committee. And the next one was in terms of custody. It was an action from the December one, and it was about the strategic alliance and commissioning, which Viv has got a paper. Viv will be joining today with an update on that, so that one should be done. The next one was at the last committee in March, we agreed to hold a workshop, which we held on Monday the 11th of May, and it was for all members to attend that in terms of roles and responsibilities, so that one was completed. Also, we held a workshop pre this IJB with Donna on the directions, and a further update will be coming today, so that actual action can be closed off. And then the subnational Vicky Freeman attended in March, and this is still ongoing as there's no further update yet, so when she has an update she will bring one back. And I just wanted to raise, because there was the deadline of yesterday, if you haven't done so, I have sent a couple of reminders out, is to have your registers of interest into myself. As I say, it was for yesterday, so if you can double check and get it to me as soon as possible. I have got a register for it, so I think that's everything in terms of actions. I don't know.
Perfect. Thank you very much. But any questions or comments to any of the actions and updates?
Just to note about the subnational planning, so the main aspect of that will be the unscheduled care elements, so the improve and flow side of things. So we'll make sure a report comes back. Vicky Freeman's providing updates to other kind of committees, etc. on that, but I think it is worth about what the impact of that will have.
Yeah, no, very true. Thank you very much. And yeah, we will get an update when appropriate to the IJB as well. So that's good. Thank you. Okay, so if nobody has anything else to say, just to again agree with Amber, if you haven't submitted your register of interest, it's one of the things that we are legally required to, so please
Yeah.
make sure that happens as soon as possible, because the deadlines are there for a reason, and we do need to report on them. And just to keep all of us right in all the business we do, so I would appreciate that that gets done
And
as
they'll
soon
be
as possible.
published next week. They will be published on the website next week with the register, so we'll see.
Perfect, so if you could do that as soon as possible this week to get that over to Amber so that it can get published together, that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving us on to item number 5, which is a process for appointing a chief finance officer. And Kirsty, you will talk us through this, please.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, this outlines the process for appointing of the chief finance officer, with the recommendation coming to the end of a committee that we had, that there was the agreement from voting members around the table to endorse the appointment of Sean Barrett. And basically, this is just following due process to make sure that the final approval is made by voting members today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Short and sweet.
that's very short and sweet. Does anybody have questions in regards to the process before I go to approval? Okay, in that case, can I ask members if we are happy to approve? Okay, that's everybody approving. Thank you very much. And Sean, well done, and thank you for joining us officially. Congratulations.
Thank you, delighted to be here.
I know we hear lots from you later in the agenda, so we'll look forward to that. Thank you. Okay, item number 6, which is a proposed new integration joint board directions, and I believe Donna will talk us through that. So,
Thanks, Chair. Okay, this is essentially the final stage of the proposed new IJB directions. Everything's in the paper. We've got a full list of all the new directions, and they've all been laid out in the report in the template that will be used for issuing the directions to the constituent parties. There will be a bit of work that will need to be carried out during the first year of these new directions to identify some local outputs that will meet the evidence the delivery of the local outcomes, and there's also some further work required around assigning the finances to each of the directions. And it's often to consider and take any feedback.
thank you very much, Donna. It was a short and sweet today. Can I ask the room, do we have any questions or comments in regard to the paper or any feedback?
Thanks very much for the paper. I'm just in terms of the outcomes and the measures that are kind of proposed. You said there's to do further work in relation to them, and I think it'd be really helpful if there could be alignment between them and what the board and the council are already having to report, so that we don't end up where we're focusing so much on so many different key indicators and writing reports that we're duplicating a lot of effort and things. So I think there's a real trick in trying to streamline some of this, and also the report talks about 6 monthly reporting and then annual reporting, and I just wonder if that also maybe needs to be looked at in terms of what's already maybe reported to board committees and council committees, so that we're not ending up again creating an industry of having different reports, but how can we be really slick about how we can report this all together. So that was just some comments in terms of that, to make sure that we don't create too much of a bureaucracy around this, so that there's capacity as directed of delivering the work and making improvements in service. That's me, thanks.
Thanks, Valerie. I think that's fair comments. You want to come back on that, Donna, or Kirsty?
Yes, and I think that's absolutely key, Valerie, that we do that. I think we need to make sure we are going through due process of both parties first before they're coming in via the IJB, and not having any duplication in that as well. So I feel quite strongly about that we do that, so we are not heavy and actually creating, as you've noted, an industry in and around this. So we will work with the governance officers for both the local authority and the NHS to make sure that process is applied, and we'll follow that up by way of an action at the next IGB.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that point? Otherwise, Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I tried to collect some comments back from colleagues on the programme board, but got very little, which I take as positive. I think some of the stuff that's in the direction around the detail, the responsibility for delivery, the anticipated delivery, and as we just heard, how we collect information, what we do with it is another key point. And I noted that it's not temporary, but it will be updated between now and the March meeting, which I think is helpful. I think one of the key points to mention is more a general point, and it's around the difficulty I think we're having in collecting information from carers. From contacts in other parts of the country, they have carers forums or whatever you wish to call it, but forums are such where carers actually can get together, and part of that, the point of that is that we can get directly from them, and that's something I hope we can address in general in the next year, and I'll be mentioning that again in a couple of papers later on, so please, if I'm repetitive, it's I think very important.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And I think that's, like you said, that's a general comment, so that's definitely important. And I think as an IJB, we are very keen to make sure that those voices can influence and shape what we do as well. So definitely keep mentioning it at every point that you feel appropriate. Thank you. Okay, further comments?
So I thought it was an interesting point you bring up there, Val, but what instantly sprung to my mind was that if the Integration Joint Board has been set up as a driver for change, then it needs to be leading the way. So I think you're right, we don't know what a bureaucratic system that creates conflict, work for the sake of work's sake. I would absolutely 100% agree with that. But I wouldn't want it to minimise or diminish, I think, the role of the IGB either. And it is about being able to see what's happening, and we're kind of Integration Joint Board driving that change. So whether it's giving direction to the council or the NHS in regards to how it delivers its service. So it's only a comment in regards to that. That's the only thing. Is there a conflict there? Or is there one? Maybe, isn't it? And the assurance, and I've had it here from you before, Don, just in regards to if we need to get into the detail, how we need to very high level strategic direction, but the detail lead the issues that we get into that if needed. So we can understand any decision we're making at a board level, how that then we get in potential come back and change that if we need to.
So currently the reporting requirements that we're setting now is a 6-monthly report and update on the delivery of the directions, and yes, it's at strategic level, but on a quarterly basis there will be updates on the delivery of directions going through the health and social care leadership, and each of the directorates will also be looking at their own operational level performance information, which will have a lot more detail on the operational level. Wouldn't necessarily bring the operational level up into this forum. However, then I can give assurance that it will be considered and it will be looked at frequently. And it will all be going in the leadership group as well.
Thank you.
And that can give assurance up to the board.
I'm sorry.
So it's to come back, it's you know, the IGB is absolutely there to kind of drive that change and set that direction. It was just more about less of consistency of some of the indicators, and obviously if there's gaps and things like that can be looked at to be delivered, but it's just that we can end up reporting an awful lot of data that gets people, you know, really focused on the detail, when actually, you know, it's like, you know, the NHS board has a responsibility in terms of, you know, oversight and things. So it's how we work through it in the way that meets everybody's needs, but doesn't create a huge challenge in the system. So yeah, it's a tricky space, and there is a balance to be had, but I'm sure we can do it.
And I think the key part is about the assurances, and the assurances should be coming from that operational level. So by way of an example, the coming home report, you know, I know that that's being looked at, so we know the operational details going to come forward in terms of any potential changes to the model of care that we, as a strategic body, outline and approve. So it's all about that alignment through the leadership team, as Dawn has referenced.
Yeah, that's and yeah, I think just going back on that, I think it's very much about getting it right for the IJB, but also getting it right for everybody and not
Yeah.
creating unnecessary duplication.
Mhm.
And I think that's, that's what we need to avoid absolutely, while still getting the right details at every level. Thank you. Brilliant, thanks for that.
That's okay, yeah, no, I think Semi answered my own question by just thinking about it a bit more. But I mean, first of all, I really welcome the reduction in the number of directions and the increased clarity and how they're set out. And even that reduction is really reflected by the number of directions, some of the individual directions replace. So clearly a huge amount of work. So thank you for that. My question kind of relates to whether are directions that are for either for the NHS or for the council in isolation, and where those, so for example, I'm looking at direction 6, which is the adult protection and domestic abuse direction, which is there for services for Dumfries and Galloway Council. I'm aware that obviously the NHS has a role to play around adult protection and domestic abuse and referral and all those kind of aspects. So my question is, where it is just with one agency, does that present any kind of risk of this is the council's job, so we're not doing something? Whereas there's other kind of cross-agency whole system elements, and that's not just that direction that relates from the other directions.
I think the approach we've taken is mirroring the statutory guidance that's been issued, okay? And the guidance is issued that we need to have a direction for every function and service that's identified in the integration scheme, okay?
Yeah.
So when we looked at the integration scheme and made sure that we had all those functions and services in there, there isn't an NHS function or service that actually covers adult support and protection and domestic abuse, okay? So while the direction is actually only issued to the council in this example, there is elements of the both organisations working together to work and support people through adult support and protection issues. The NHS, and I think, are actually represented on the Adult Support and Protection Board, are they? I'll check that, Willem, but I think they are, yes. So there's, while we're fulfilling our statutory requirements on the directions, because there isn't that function or service for an NHS, the directions are actually only issued to the council, because the council only are the only body that has a function or a service that's covering that. Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess the questions in my head then, and then maybe this is for another day's, and this is what makes directions complicated. The thing that we've simplified out is just that we're not losing anything in terms of a joint integrated approach to whatever that service might be because of that.
I think there's, I'm sorry.
Just to come back, sorry, Donna, it's a partnership.
Yeah.
It's not just, that's delegated, so that's why we've got that direction there. So it's actual partnership, it's not the local authority.
It lands in partnership, and then they, that's that significant assurance from that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Donna. Thanks for the report. Couple of things, a number of things. We talk about we're going to be sharing information, so just to make sure we get the right balls in place. Well, Will's picked up on that, and I picked up on it as well, because clearly there's a public protection committee.
Yep.
But equally, it's a well-known fact that majority of victims of domestic abuse are female, and very often there's a high percentage are pregnant, so obviously come in contact with the NHS and stuff. But I mean, we're starting to get into the sort of the delivery of of that rather than us at a strategic level sort of setting that. But I would like to see some more information in there that actually makes those links, that makes that, you know, makes it more explicit. And as I went through some of the directions, there seemed to be a lot of, I don't like saying cut and paste because it's not cut and paste, but there's certainly a lot of overlap in relation to the wording as you go through it, you know, saying that we need to do it that, and I sometimes just wonder that when we do that, so for example, talk about model of care, blended model of community-based prevention, early intervention, social support, and that gets repeated a number of times, and you know, what it is actually how we do it, but how do we reinforce to people that we need to treat these as individual things, and that, you know, we have to look at them and sort them all out, because people get tensive when they start to see it. And as I was going through it, and it's a lot easier if you've got paper rather than on the computer, but you can sort of compare them side by side. But it needs to not be formulaic, and it needs to be about how do we make sure that we actually deliver these to these individuals. It's about how do we deliver the service and the care, and then balance the finances. Yeah.
Don't know, Kirsty, did you want to come back on that or?
No, I think that's a good point made.
Yeah, that's fine. So that's not other points. One of the points I wanted to make, which probably goes well with both Willem's and Andy's point, I'm wondering if there is some sort of mechanism or somewhere where we could put a general collaboration clause into all of the directions. Because I think as an IJB and as a health and social care partnership, working together on facing all of those different challenges that we are facing is key to achieve those. And I think the directions why they might sit primarily with one or the other within the partnership, having a general clause that everybody needs to work together to achieve these might actually be useful, I thought. So I'm wondering if that's something we can implement somewhere. I'll see if that's something we can include. Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions or comments before I take us through what we're being asked today? Okay, that's fine. So we are being asked to approve and issue the proposed new IJB directions in Appendix 1. I assume you will make a couple of tweaks, obviously, based on our conversation today. So if you could circulate the final ones just for information again, that would be appreciated. Thank you. I'll be happy to approve with all of the recommendations. I see people nodding. Thank you.
Well, we'll see that in a minute, then I take it. And it's reflected in the minutes, so we're clear on what the decision we made.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, once that's been circulated, we'll issue them as well accordingly to everybody. Thank you. Notes that work will continue to allocate the budget to propose new IJB directions. I'm sure there is a lot of work happening in the background, obviously, and we will get updates, I'm sure, in the future. Notes that work will continue with responsible officers to identify outputs within the anticipated delivery section across the new IJB directions. So again, we're happy to note that. Agree to receive 6 monthly assurance reports on the delivery of new IJB directions, subject to approval with effect from December 26, and annual report as per statutory requirements. So again, we just discussed that we are working collaboratively to make sure that that fits within everything else as well. So I'll be happy to agree that point. Okay, thank you. And note that all extant directions relating to NHS services, Appendix 2, are revoked and retained by the NHS board. I'm happy to note that as well. Okay, I think that's all of my actions. Thank you so much, Donna, for presenting. And also thanks a lot for all of the work, because I know this has been quite a substantial piece of work to get it right and to change things. So thanks to you and all of the team who's been working on that.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That takes us to item number 7, which is the committee chairs taking members through the reports. First of all comes the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee, and the update supposed to be by Maureen.
Thank you, Chair. Most of the information from that is on our paper here today. But also, I would just like to bring to your attention that we are reducing the voting numbers, and we're bringing them in line with 4 and 4. So it will reduce, and that's going to be discussed at the full council meeting this Thursday. And also in that meeting, there's also going to be, that's agenda item 7 at this Thursday's meeting. And there's a sum of 2.8 million they're also going to be agreed, whether that's taken forward, but 26, 27 into the budget. into this budget, the IGD budget, and that's to help with ongoing savings. So that will be discussed at the full council, so we won't know until that's been agreed. And then that's when all your members will be chosen, and then we'll update you on that at the next meeting. There's nothing really much. Our quarterly meetings, we've already had one of those meetings, and that was quite a success. So that was with Julie Walters, and they will be ongoing, just to carry forward things that we can discuss to bring us all up to date. Other than that, everything is actually on the paper here. If we have any questions. Thanks a lot.
Can I ask if anybody has questions?
Sorry,
Sorry.
did you say something? Okay.
That was your report on that?
Yes, basically it's all in here in the paper, what was going through.
No problem, thank you very much. So does anybody have questions or comments in regards to the paper?
I probably just wanted to highlight there was quite a level of policies that we did take through that process. There was just a couple of elements highlighted just about naming chief officer and governance officers. So we will meet those amendments and we'll get those all uploaded. So we've got the new suite, refreshed suite of policies in there. In terms of the integration scheme impact, obviously, Maureen's referenced about the voting members from 4 and 4, so it's the same for the NHS side of things as well. So we will bring forward what both governance officers from the council side of things have allocated. In terms of directions, in terms of the integration scheme impact, obviously we've got the paper we've just approved about revoking those directions that then come under the NHS, but also the significant amount of work, I must say, that Sean's been doing with both parties in terms of those delegated budgets and set aside budgets as well. So that probably just to add to that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wanted just to raise the conversation that was had at 3.5 in the paper around the extension of voting rights and the changes to the to voting rights for lived experience members for September. And Kirsty and I have had an ongoing conversation with us, I'm sure, with Jim and others about that extension. There was a national meeting to understand the impact for third sector across Scotland. It's probably fair to say that there's a different position in almost every area about the local impact that means. Our focus clearly is on how we implement that as best we possibly can in Dumfries and Galloway. So I have, Kirsty and I have been in conversation this week around perhaps some work that we might need to take up locally to make sure that we're content. Government's been clear that actually regardless of what you do locally, the new order applies from the 1st of September, whatever you've got in place. But and it looks like from the information that we have so far that we're not going to get the absolute direction from a national perspective that we thought we were waiting for. So things like training and induction and so on, which are already the responsibility here, might need to be strengthened. So I suppose I just wanted to highlight that again in terms of our view as we need greater scrutiny on that. Kirsty and I are working together from the third sector. I think we could probably do well with including all members who are having voting rights extended to them to bring together to see what we can better do together. Nationally, we'll split up, work for carers, work for services, work for third sector. The government has invested in organisations to look at training and support for carers and for lived experience, but hasn't given any money to the third sector to do the same. Same story as usual. So I think locally that's where our focus is becoming, and actually how can we bring everyone together with Kirsty and others to then say what can we better do in terms of working together to make sure that the new rules are most effective for Dumfries and Galloway. So it was an important conversation I think we had at committee, but I just wanted to highlight some updates we've had this week that we're probably not going to get the detail we thought we were from a national basis. So we probably need to do some work locally, and we've only got a couple of months to do some. So
Yeah, very important.
So I think the key action will be for us all to get together to kind of formulate what we're going to do locally. It's disappointing that there isn't additional training and support from a national level, because that's what I've just been waiting on as well. But no matter, and I think it's probably a key point, because we'll have to make changes to our integration scheme that we've just approved. Scottish ministers have said we don't have to resubmit for final approval again. We can just make said amendment based on the guidance that's due to be released. Our standing orders will change, so there'll be a few policy changes that I'll need to take forward following that.
Seven was fun.
So it was, yeah. So I'm getting my head around the timescale. So obviously by the next meeting, we'll need to, how's the governance decision making? What decisions do we need to make before the next meeting in order to facilitate everything?
Yeah, so that's what we'll work out when we have
Okay,
our
okay.
initial offline discussion, and actually, I've just actually caught sight of the frequently asked questions from Alan. Thanks for that, Alan, because I had seen it directly from the national team, so there's something about communication there as well I want to pick up, but we'll work it through with Vicky Freeman, policy officer, as well, just so we're adhering absolutely to what's being said.
So I was going to ask a question, but it was very similar to what Alan brought it to my attention before the meeting started. The only thing I've got outlined is the potential impact in between the 1st of September and our next meeting, which I would think would be negligible on the new voting members.
Yeah.
Would that be the case? Will there be any potential negative impact? I wouldn't think it'll affect.
I do not anticipate anything negative with regards to it.
No,
That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we definitely need to capture an action on this. I know you guys are already on it, which is good, and I think it would be good to have an offline meeting just to discuss everything we can do. Obviously, Jim, from a carers rep point of view as well, in third sector rep, and we still have a vacancy on the lived experience rep as well. So I think it's just something we need to take offline and work at speed on, because we need to get it right. And I agree, and I think, while we don't necessarily have the guidance that we were hoping for, we just need to get it right as much as we can locally and work together. And I think the same goes for training. We discussed last time already that, we will be happy to try and arrange training locally as well. I know you are supported for that sector. I know there is some training as well from National Carers Body available. So I think we just have to see what's out there and how we can make it work basically between us. So if there's anything when we need to support it, we'll take that offline and get that done as well. And then by September, hopefully we can.
Just to mention, which is for the I don't know what it's like in Alan's area of work, but certainly nationally, the carers organisations have been very well organised in the run up to the 1st of September. And I've been at 1, 2, maybe 3 meetings with colleagues from up and down the country, and we're being led by a national group who seem to have good contacts with government officials who have been taking this forward. And most of the papers I've had up to date are shared with custody, apart from the ones that I've had with them when I was on holiday. But I think there's some good stuff in that that will be very helpful, and might even be a wee bit more than you've had, Alan. So pick that up as soon as you want.
I think just thanks to re-emphasise the point. I think there is from our sector's perspective, there is very much a local view of carers and also the alliance work. I think with those with experience have been able to nationally coordinate the requirements because they've been funded to do that. The first sector hasn't had that position, nor have we had the guidance, I suppose. So I think our focus from the sector is we just need to get it right for Dumfries and Galloway, and the guidance really from Scottish Government is, regardless of what you've done with your standing orders, everyone has voting rights from the 1st of September, and actually what we want from our local reps is to feel able to participate, not to have to abstain or withdraw from votes because they don't feel ready to be able to do that. So yeah, very welcome the idea of taking that offline and see what we can do, and I'm sure there fully lots the training from carers that have been identified that we can actually use for more representatives. So thank you, appreciate that, Chair.
Absolutely, and it might be worth not just for all of the new reps, but just for general, for all of the voting members, to do a session again, because I think, going from September onwards, there won't be a separation about voting members, who they are, but everybody will have equal rights anyway, so we should have a shared agreement, almost, and shared training and knowledge as well.
Just a quick comment, because I think the fundamental difference to yourselves as being voting members of that is my understanding is because as voting members you have a right to ask for agenda items specific to, well, it's specific to the independent sector, whatever it may be, which you don't have at this moment in time, I don't think. So I think that'd be fundamental. So if you look to particularly drive a particular agenda, then you've got the right to do that as voting members.
Absolutely. Because I would hope that, if any of you ask for something, we would already make that happen even without, formally. I think we are quite lucky in Dumfries and Galloway that we work quite well together and have quite good working relationships. But yeah, from September onwards, that will just be formalized a little bit more as well. So absolutely. Okay, so we captured an action to take that offline and arrange a meeting, or potentially more than one, to get it right for September, and then hopefully, come September, we'll definitely have it back on the agenda to confirm everything. Okay, any other updates in regards to the audit and risk committee? Any other questions? I don't see any hands up, so thank you very much, Maureen, for sharing those updates and for everybody else as well. The next one is the update from the committee that I shared, which is the strategic planning, finance and commissioning update. Most of the agenda items you'll probably see on the agenda today anyway. So first of all, we approved the IJB financial plan and budget. So we'll definitely hear about that on this agenda later on. So I won't go into detail right now. We also had an update on the strategic planning group reset. Isabel from the third sector has now taken on the chair of that group, and she's basically resetting it completely with new members and new structure. So there wasn't a lot of detail yet just because it's so new, but there will be more detail coming to us in future months as well. And they also just reset the terms of reference and everything else. There was a general call for more collaboration and also for attendance, because attendance has been quite low in the past, and I think it's a really important group to get it right. People actually have to attend, so that would just be our call pretty much for people who are part of that group to actually attend and make sure they can influence what happens there going forward as well. Next, we discussed the development and recommendation approval of the IJB directions, which again I won't mention because we just did that, so that's fine. And then we sorry, losing my paper here. We talked about the complex needs plan update and implications of coming home report. So there has been an update to committee, quite a detailed update, because there is new legislation that we need to be on top of, but it will come back in the next set of committees, and then following that it will come to the IJB. So again, there will be quite a few implications for Dumfries and Galloway locally, including financial implications potentially as well, but we will discuss that next time at the IJB as well. We had a quarterly engagement and participation activity report, which is just the general report of everything that's been going on. Lots of good points were raised, including all of our activity and also communication and engagement activities and increased membership. We obviously also covered the election period, which was slightly different in regards to comms because of the regulation, which we can't do. And also the positive engagement initiatives. And we touched a little bit as well on consultation fatigue and AI and everything else. So that were points highlighted. And then we heard from the Alcohol and Drug Partnership annual performance report. And this was actually the performance report from 2024 to 2025. So it came slightly late to us as a committee, but we also heard updates and we will receive the current year's report in a more timely manner at the committee as well. And apart from that, I think that was probably all of the highlights that we discussed, but I'm happy to take questions for comments. Kirsty, you wanted to come?
So just referencing the coming home report, there's probably that plea that we'll need to make that linkage to the directions as well, and what impact will that have against those directions. So we'll kind of take that forward as well and make sure Caroline Ronaldson, who's leading on that, aligns to the directions too, or we have to update any changes regarding the outcome.
Just a really minor point, Chair, at section 3.5, talking about the coming home report, I'm referenced there in the notes as Mark, and further down as MK. So I think just for consistency, we can change Mark to MK.
I missed that, but yeah, good point. We'll definitely make sure that gets updated. Thank you.
Yes, it's very much on the same point as Mark just picked up. Those of us who are sat here generally know who the initials relate to, and you know what I've been sharing. I've looked at these and never sort of seen it before. But actually, these are public documents, and people looking at them, they don't know who MK is or AMCF is and stuff. And we actually, I think for us, for knowing who actually attends the meetings, it'd be useful to have the attendees list on.
It's all from the minutes.
It's well, no.
Oh, on
On
the.
the committee update.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
so.
That's a fair point. I think we can add that to the committee update, just so that it's not.
There's a heck of a lot of initials in there, so.
Oh, absolutely, and it's sometimes hard to keep track of initials, absolutely. So yeah, that's a fair comment. Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, about the coming home report and the implications of that, and how prepared are we as an IJB? Because it's going to bring significant challenges not only financial, but also structuring and thinking about how we deliver service in the community. Are we going to have a specific plan, or is it being presented to the IGB next for us to kind of think about it? Or how is that we're going to approach this piece of work? Because like you said in this report, it's huge and it brings a lot of other challenges to the challenge that we're already experiencing. So I think the comment that Christy made about how this is going to affect our directions is also a good one, because we go directions, but there are new directions coming from Scottish Government throughout the year and how that relates to the work that we are doing. But also, this is a huge piece of work. And I just want to understand what the plan is around this work.
So basically, the plan is being worked on right now, and that's why we didn't bring it to this IJP, because I think it's still work in progress right now. A lot of this comes with very tight deadlines, so some of the deadlines were literally within days where they asked for an initial response, sort of what we think the scope might be, but the details aren't clear yet. And because they aren't clear yet, they are still working on it, basically. So I know there is a lot of work happening in the background right now, and we need to make sure, like Kirsty was saying, that it fits in with everything else, and we don't yet know the scope of it and the impacts of it. And that's why we haven't brought it here. So that's all being worked out right now. We know that there will definitely be impacts on, operational, financial, everything we do. And that's why, the whole team is really on it right now, basically. So I think that's probably a question I would say we need to park for now. And then the next time it goes through committees and the IJP, we can then, they will present what the plan is, and we can then scrutinize it and see how we can work with it, if that's okay.
I suppose it's what Caroline and the team are going to essentially be doing is doing that gap analysis of where we are against the coming home report, to then align where our finances are, where we are in terms of that service delivery or not, and then it needs to be discussed, those gaps. How are we going to actually mitigate it? What are the risks around it all? EQI, all of those documents that we need in and around all of this, we should be bringing forward to the IJB.
I think one point, we were asked to identify if there are any easy cases that could quickly be coming home. And the initial analysis was that most of the people who are affected by this will be quite complex, so that won't be necessarily an easy and quick fix. So that's what they're looking into. So yeah, it's early days yet. It's moving quite quickly. So as I understand. Any further questions or comments on the committee report?
It's more just subsequent to the committee report that on Friday I was at the drug desk summit with the First Minister, Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care. We're really bringing up a lot of people together to really talk about the challenges that exist in relation to this in Scotland. And so I think it could be really, really important that we do get those timely reports from the Alcohol and Drug Partnership, and also that the IGB can think about, well, what might that mean in some of the directions. There's a lot of focus on the Charter of Rights, and actually that's maybe something that might be good to build into directions in terms of specialist drug and alcohol services, that there's demonstration of how they've incorporated the Charter of Rights into work that they're doing. So I think there's something in the IGB space as well in relation to that. So I think that the 25-26 annual report to the EDP in September time, so as soon as I think as soon as possible after that, they can go through the committee structure, because I think there maybe be some things that we would want to raise to the IGB in relation to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we did get the commitments that it would be much quicker this time around. So I think that is a really valid point, and I think we need to make sure that we are on top of all of those things. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I move us on to item number 8. Item number 8 is the financial performance year end 2025-2026. And Sean, you will take us through this, please.
Thanks, Chair. This paper is the financial performance for year end 25-26. I'd revised the board with that overall position for the year, and we've ended up It covers obviously all IGMD, delegated NHS and local authority budgets, sets out the final outcome. In the context of what we already recognised, that the start of the year was a very challenging financial position. At the start of the year, the board agreed a financial plan, which projected a significant in-year deficit reflecting underlying structural pressures and the scale of savings required. While progress has been made in managing that position, the draft year-end outturn still reports an overall overspend of £22.7 million. That's before additional partner support. This comprises an overspend of £13.2 million within the NHS delegated services and £9.5 million within the local authority delegated services. Both positions reflect a combination of demand-led pressures, workforce challenges, and the partial delivery of savings programmes during the year. Members will note that this position is being addressed through additional financial support from both partners, alongside the use of established recovery arrangements. This results in a balanced in-year position, which is the position that's extinct to the draft accounts. The board to highlight the underlying pressure remains a recurring deficit will carry forward into financial year 26-27, which we've reported previously. Both NHS and the local authority delegated budgets face significant savings requirements to achieve balance and financial sustainability. There's underlying pressure in the NHS delegated position of £9 million and £7 million in the social work position. The paper also sets out proposed arrangements for applying the £2.8 million financial recovery support funding to support delivery of the adult social care savings plan and transition to a more sustainable model of care, which Councillor Johnson mentioned previously, will be considered by full council on Thursday. So in summary, while there's been progress in reducing the scale of the initial projected deficit, the overall position continues to reflect the system under sustained financial pressure, requiring continued focus on recovery and reform to achieve long-term sustainability. The paper's there and has all the details. I'm happy to take any questions, observations, or comments.
Thank you very much. Can I please open it up to the room for questions and comments? Obviously, we know it's quite a challenging situation we are in, and there is quite a lot of detail in the report. So,
thanks so much, Kim. Congratulations, Sean. You're finally. Thank you for that answer. I had about 16 or 17 questions, but I've reduced it to 3. Thanks to you. Thank you for your first day, so it's but I am rusty as well, so I'm trying to play catch up to being absolutely honest in regards to what's happened. It's been a year since I've been here, so first thing is we're being told in 25-26, some of this stuff we haven't just covered, but there's been a balance through additional NHS funding and a request to the council for additional funding to kind of explain what will be fundamentally different in 26-27 that will prevent this position going forward again, so to speak, which I'll do now, Sean. Decision making clarification as well, just got it as a single kind of question. So, the Integration Joint Board agrees its budget for both the council and the NHS, and there you go, off you go, and that's got a fundamental change as the year goes on. But taking back historically, so the council, I'll use the council as an example. Like you said, 9.5 million, you shot 9.5 million, they spent beyond the budget was allocated to them. What's the decision-making processes for that? I need to understand what that is, who does it, and where it happens. And as far as, so just try and keep it balanced. So what was the total agency spend within the delegated NHS service of 25-26? And how does it compare to the previous financial years? Please.
Thanks, Councillor Carruthers. The process for setting the budget and why it will be different this year is that as a chief finance officer works with both parties, tries to understand the risk, ways to get the settlement, and tries to balance what it projected forward for the social work side and the NHS side. Both the social work, the NHS budgeting and the council and the NHS, they come and basically tell ourselves this is what you're heading towards, and they're part of the savings plan, which we then need to adopt. As a chief finance officer, you sit in the middle and we bring forward the risks of what you say, and you always put forward, this is what I think we're going to spend, we'll get a gap there, how we're going to address this gap together, and that's what comes into the budget process. So in the council, what would have came forward would have been, we're projecting a £12.5 million problem. This is how it came out, what can we do about it, and we've jointly come up with a savings plan, which will come to the IGIB. We've not been as transparent over that whole process, and I don't think the IGIB's taken as much of a say and taken more ownership on both sides we've almost left the NHS and left the council to come up with their own ones. We need to step into that space, and as chief finance officer, that's where I am at the moment, is trying to step into that space and work with both organisations so that we jointly come up with plans to address it. Will it be any different? On the social work side, it's already a bit different because the measures that were taken last year, painful measures, which have been felt across our citizens and across our provider partners and our in-house provider service, have had to reduce. That's the only way. That's the only plan on the moment. At the moment, is to reduce care to get a balanced budget. The full year impact of that has been felt through it. So the 12.5 million last year is now sitting at 7 million. Other measures, will start to reduce that, and the plan is to get that back down to zero. Recycling of care and reducing care is a very painful process for everybody in the system. I totally reflect that, and that's why we put forward this request for additional funding to help us deliver this financial recovery plan, because it can't just be about reducing care. It has to be about what alternatives can we give to individuals to live their lives and to improve their outcomes. So that £2.8 million is key in this. It's not just there to reduce the 7 million. It's there to provide resources to help deliver different models. It's there to shift to preventative measures. It's there to partially offset in-year delays of some of the measures that we agreed, shortfalls, but also the main thing is to minimise the risk to the local authority of another overspend. Can I guarantee that we will manage that? No, I can't guarantee that, because already fresh pressures coming through, through the back door, or constantly being new cost pressures coming through, new demand pressures coming through, and that's the exact same on the NHS side. I don't have the agency spend figure. I don't know if any of the colleagues have it for the NHS side. It's in another paper which I don't have in front of me, but I do know it's reduced significantly from last year. It's still a significant number, and it's one of the areas that the NHS delegated position and non-delegated focus on.
I suppose, if you don't mind, Chair, I'll just come back. Just my initial thoughts are, is actually for a governance perspective, come back to early safely. Again, because, or should the integration joint board be an app to allocate the money to that, it's supposed to plan, or the NHS, kind of what that's through Scottish Government level, whatever it may be, but that's the kind of things that are coming into my mind. Okay, if the budget, if it is unsustainable, which it sounds like, Sean, because you can't give a cast iron guarantee, then should we be looking at other methods, and is there any governance issues that potentially could create a conflict?
My view is that we have to manage our budget with what we've got, and even the long-term sustainability is we have to change our models of care, and we have to even the coming home report. That's kind of what we should have been doing and what we've been trying to do in the past. We don't get any additional money from the Scottish Government to do that, and we do lobby, through COSLA on the local authority side, and the NHS are in the Scottish Government financial recovery process. We do, try and, in NHS side, the Answering Younger in assisting us to try and get to a balanced position. We're working very hard to look at no stone unturned, but the crux of it is it's a national problem. It's not just a local problem here. It's a national problem, that a UK problem also. There is a massive shortfall in social care, which is almost needed to help the rest of the system flow. But we've overspent the all over, and we are here to try and work within the budgets we've got, because we don't have the funds sitting there, and we're Scottish Government very clear on what the NHS are permitted to overspend by, and the local authority are pretty clear on what we're allowed to spend.
Just one final comment, if that's okay, and it is on my comment, but it's going back to when I hear Val and Gracie individual speaking, the different thing, it feels like we're playing a game of darts. The dartboard is going in a circle trying to hit the way it feels at the moment. There's so many things moving. It's like, how do you actually bring back forward our plan, delivering services, whether it's within a combined budget or whether it's actually the type of services that we deliver. Like I said, I've been away for a year, trying to catch up, it feels like a loss of which was, but no, that's how we feel.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's building a little bit on Ian's point around the kind of governance, and it also follows on from our discussions around the revised directions earlier, and the next piece of work around the costing of those directions. And maybe the impossible task of how you cost those directions in a way that they match the budget. Are we baking in an overspend right at the beginning, so how achievable they are, and then what the change request process is of adding more resource in for that to authorize that overspend, rather than maybe it being a retrospective process that we can get to the end of the year and we don't even see it coming. So I don't know how we manage the expectations of those directions and the value that's put against them, against the demand.
It's, I suppose it comes down to strategic commissioning to a strategic plan. This is really difficult, because you can throw a ball and think, okay, we need another 100 care home beds. We're trying to manage with more care home placements than we've actually got budget for at the moment. So they don't both add up. We have to create the space to allow that shift to start to grow services for the future. No easy answer, and I know you're not saying there's an easy answer, but we're currently spending more than we have a budget for, and we can't think that the next Scottish Government budget is going to give us anything extra. We have to manage that locally, you know, and how we do that by minimising the outcomes for our citizens is the best that we can do. Directions is going to be quite a dilemma, because if you're spending more than you've got at the moment, we need to have an eye on what is it that we're trying to get to, and what is it that, you know, this is what we've got, this is what we're actually spending, how do you marry the two of them up. Also, a lot of the directions will cross over each other, which so if we added up all the directions, I imagine that the budgets assigned to each of the directions will be greater than the budget that we've got, so we need to somehow marry our change programs and our visions for the future into that scenario. Really difficult. I'm not going to die. It's a really difficult position to be in.
Looking forward to the future, obviously we're at the moment we could say we're not a sustainable organisation. We're hoping that we can close the gap. But what happens if we can't close that gap? What's the crystal ball telling us? What future have we got if we're not sustainable? And we have to ask the authorities and the health board for £9-10 million every year. What's the future hold for us?
That's the governance route that we would have to go down. That's the governance route. We have to do everything we can to try and develop services which match the Scottish Government's NHS expectations and which match the Council's expectations on the funding. If we can't get to that position, then I speak regularly with the head of finance and the local authority and the chief executive, and likewise on the NHS side. But this is a joint issue that we have to address, and it'll be quite the governance route. The regular quarterly monitoring will give us that idea of how close we are to getting to that position. But there are a lot of eyes on this, so we will, where we end up is where we end up, but it won't be for the want of trying to get back to a balanced position. And then we'll take it back through the budget process, lobbying through COSLA on behalf of the council and speaking to the Scottish Government. And I'm quite looking forward to hearing Ernst & Young got to say on the NHS side. I think been to some of those workshops about what they can see, but no magic bullet, but the governance will be key in all of this. There's an integration scheme that is and responsibility partner sides. I'll maybe look to some of my NHS colleagues to maybe give a little bit of help.
Hi Sean, are you anticipating that the recycling percentages that you put in the last paper to continue this year, or in light of the budget outturn that you're projecting, they will need to change again?
I think it will be a moving I'm moving position, Nicola. But without a doubt, we monitor it on a weekly basis to see how close we are getting to and what shortfall, and we're in the process of doing the sort of end of June position, and we'll get close to that and we can see what that indicates where we are. And if there is any opportunity for a bit of respite or easing off, then we will bring that into the position. If there's not, then we'll report it back round about how long this is going to continue. And there are significant challenges in the learning disability and physical disability spaces there to do with care at the high cost of the care in these areas is where our huge pressures are, and that's the area where we need to look at the coming home, the complex care plan, and move to a different model, because as it stands at the moment, it's unaffordable with the resources that we've got.
Is that going to be communicated to providers? Because obviously we're workforce planning and trying to support existing kind of services, and in terms of recruitment and retention, it's incredibly difficult. We're already seeing the the reduction in carers across the region, across all providers. So it's very, very difficult for us to judge what's going to happen if we're anticipating. I believe in convention about 10 packages that were offered out to providers, of which 5 were not required. So it's essentially, a handful of packages over two and a half months. So on that basis, there's a lot of providers that are on sugary pegs, and I think that communication about how they, that changing kind of environment, needs to be communicated really effectively to providers so that they can kind of plan.
Yes, definitely, Nicola. And I totally acknowledge that it's probably not been as transparent as it should be, but transparency is definitely an area that we have to move towards. And through the community services leadership team and the Health and Social Care Partnership, we do consider these, and we definitely need to think about that. We can't just leave it to sort of team managers to communicate that to providers. It needs to come from a bit of seniority around what the plan is, what the expectation is, and how it's going to impact on each of the sectors and providers it does. And I'll speak to Viv on where we are with them.
Sorry, it's just been you'd said in terms of the community, I think that undoubtedly it is an extremely difficult and complex position that we find ourselves in. The Scottish Government give the funding to the councils, chess, they then have these conversations, delegate it to the IJB, and then the IJB tell them what to do. So it's a really complex governance space that we're in. We've obviously made changes to the scheme of delegation. We've got a specific chief finance officer and chief officer now. So there is opportunities to look at kind of how things are done and kind of looked at. But we've got subnational planning as well. So there's a lot of shifting sands, I think, that everybody's kind of dealing with at the moment. But I suppose the kind of fundamental thing is we need to do things in a different way, and we need to work in different ways. In the paper that's all present very much kind of speaks into that space, because we do need to move into that space with our communities and our providers about, there is a limited level of resource. How can we work together in partnership and collaborate to make the best use of the funds that we do have? But I think there's absolutely, that it's a really, really difficult period that we will be going through, and it's how we continue to make sure that we work together to provide services in the best way that we can for our local communities, during this period. But I think looking at the kind of innovation and different approaches is going to be really key.
Andy and then Rosie.
Hi Sean, thanks for the report. No, I know that we've discussed it at previous board meetings, and we've got the 4 posts that we've put in that are costing £250,000, and somebody sort of from the outside looking in and saying, well, if you ain't getting it, why are you spending this money? Why, you know, what we actually need to be doing is cutting people rather than investing. So I think it would be good for us to sort of put it in the public domain as to the justification for that and the benefit we're going to get from that. The other thing is touching on what Alan said earlier about the third sector, you know, we get more bang for our buck when we utilise the third sector, when we're engaged in a positive way. And so I think that it's really good that we look at developing that and how we can improve things like that. And then we've got a further paper coming up about commissioning, where we're talking about the partnership approach. And I think that's going to help us because it's going to hopefully reduce some waste in as much as we're engaged with the people who accept the service, who receipt of the service. And so by matching our ability to deliver with their expectations, hopefully we'll cut away some of the waste there. So I think there's some really good stuff in here, but you could help us in relation to how we're going to strengthen the strategic partnership with these, if that's within the agreement, and then the justification for the 4 posts and how that's going to help us move forward.
The 4 posts were posts that we had to put in to help facilitate the recycling here, help discharges coming out of the hospital, data provision, and somebody to actually do a lot of the work that sits in the background. We are very light on, like I would say, back office support. In the past, these have been areas that we've probably not filled vacancies, and we've held vacancies for quite considerable time, and then ultimately you maybe don't. So these are the areas that we do struggle a wee bit with getting the people behind the scenes to model through some of this, to work through the third sector stuff. So that's mainly what those 4 posts are. I'll probably be honest with you, there'll probably be more posts I think we need, you know, on a temporary basis to help us get quite quickly to where we are, and that's where we'll use the £2.8 million on the local authority side, is to facilitate some of this change. You know, one of the big things we got hit with last year, why the position went from 8.6 to 9.5 on the local authority side was bad debt. You know, we had to over 120-day debt, so we've got 100% provision against that. Possibly bringing in, you know, enhanced debt collection, or working with people to stop them getting into debt a little bit more, would help in that particular space and reduce, so that £800,000 provision can come back into the budget and be available for care, initially to reduce the gap, but ultimately available for care, because you know, that's where we are. So it's measures like that, and in the background of working in the third sector, and we're looking at the support. Somebody come in and help us with digital. We really do struggle with putting digital out into the region, and there's so much digital out there, different versions. It's always just constantly changing. You maybe need somebody in there to help push that forward, because the model at the moment is we rely on a worker to do that on top of their day job, and that's a difficult thing for a worker to do. So these are the kind of initial 4 posts that we're considering. But I will be honest with you, I think we should go up. We will look to go a bit further than that to help push forward. Everything we do should be on the scope of reducing our cost and doing it more efficiently, but still trying to deliver outcomes for individuals.
I mean, for me, one thing that I actively use is prevention, and I think it's about how to reduce demand. And I think investing like Valerie's sort of area where we get public health, and where we're trying to encourage people to take responsibility for themselves, as well as supporting them to try and improve their health situation. I think that can be forward. So that's like an investor shade. So what you're saying here is we're investing in these people in order to try and make that statement.
Yes. Everything we do has to have that aim goal of a better, different, more sustainable work.
Yes.
Tracy, what?
Future topic. So I guess what the IJB role is, can we give some direction to think about? Because there is some reluctance, and rightly so, at the moment within our bodies, NHS and Council, to invest to save, because we're focusing on efficiencies. And that's kind of where we have been throughout this year. And yes, we have achieved many, like you said, Sean. But what is that we're going to do differently? Yeah, prevention. We talk about this a lot. We do a lot of talking. But if I ask us, what is the percentage of our budget invested in prevention? Can someone give me an answer? It's very small. And maybe we need to take it from every piece of work that we do. But for me, it's, for example, you said, Sean, in the report that it's demand led. Is it to do with the budgets? Are we being given the right budgets? This is an ever increasing demand, and yes, we can do better. Listen, you asked for assurances about the NHS. There is a huge piece of work around prescribing, for example, and this is the first year that we have managed to reduce volume. So we have achieved, and it took a lot of effort. We are doing significant measures around the management of medicines and what we do. But the reality is that nearly every day there is a new medicine that has huge promises around curing even cancer now, some type of cancers now. And so medicines are always expanding. So that's, and they have value. And yes, we're working on medicine of limited value and so on. But just going back to your question, Sean, about what else is that we need to do. I think for us as an IGB, we need to think about, do we need to set that direction to our bodies to say, is it efficiency, a percentage? Is it invest to save? Because at the moment, for example, in NHS, we do have some good ideas about invest to save, and we haven't got there yet in terms of the approval because it needs resource, and we're struggling for resource. So I am just wondering about what difference we can make as an IGB to give the directions to enable others to think about, okay, invest to save is a good thing, but what proportion of their budget, so what proportion of the measures that they are taking. For example, learning disability and complex needs is huge, and we have talked about having some facilities locally, something different from more for complex patients. So I guess it's for us, Kim, you as the chair and us as the members, what is that we need to do? And directions are the obvious answer, I guess. That could be a bit more specific about or ask. Otherwise, we are never going to get to that point of that preventative state where we would like to be. And we are always talking about and thinking about it, but the reality is that we don't have enough resources to do it. With deficiencies, and I can give you assurances from all the work that has been done in the NHS, and I know from our colleagues, and like you said, Sean, there is a lot happening there too. A lot of work is being done.
That's crazy. Yeah, and I think it comes back to the overall, I'm sorry, I take Mark and in a second, but I think it's the overall problem we have in the IJB. Finances is one piece of that, and finances are very challenging. But we are trying to do transformation while we are trying to find savings, and finding the balance in both is really challenging. I think as an IJB, we probably already have been quite brave, but for example, third sector commissioning, trying to do that differently and trying to shift things. And I think those are the kind of things we need to look, but definitely we need to look into prevention, intervention, and especially, with a population that is aging. And we know we have almost like a hard deadline coming where the age of the population will potentially flip the wrong way, and if we continue as we are, we won't get there. So I think it's definitely a challenge to the IJB, not having all of the answers, but I think it's a good challenge, Grace, and I think we need to think very clearly how we can, from a strategic point of view, enable that transformation that we need while also meeting the savings targets. Difficult, but I think we'll have to try it, obviously.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, the premise of invest to save inherently is a good one. But it's invest to save, you need something to invest with. And in order to get something to invest with, then we're going to have to seriously look at what do we stop or what do we do in a completely different way in order to get the funds. So saying something invest to save is a good idea unless you've actually got something to invest with. If it becomes a pointless area to drive down. For me, I think we need to take a small step back, and while recognising the depth of the problem, is actually recognise how well our staff across both agencies have been working in order to make some magnificent savings across the course of the year. Within the NHS, finding 15 million pounds of savings is quite some feat for staff, considering they're doing that alongside their day job. And within the NHS, as Gracie and Barry have said, we are acutely focused on how we can transform and deliver our services in different ways that's going to ensure our patients stay safe and the care delivered is safe. But essentially delivering that in different and new ways. But I think what's really important when we're talking about the really difficult financial position is to remember to thank our staff who continually deliver safe, effective care to our patients and citizens through really exceptionally challenging times. I think it's really important as an IGB, when we're talking about finance, we don't lose sight of the fact that at the end of that discussion is a patient or a service user needing care and a staff member who's delivering that. So I think for me, from the professional perspective and Ken as well, it's going to ensure that everything we do is underpinned by risk assessments to make sure that we don't create unintended consequences or services could become unsafe.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Very good reminder. And I think, we definitely need to show appreciation for everything that's being done because there's a lot of good work happening on the ground. Absolutely. Alan?
Thanks, Sharon. Probably a couple of comments in response to some members' queries. I suppose we won't touch too much on the strategic alliance direction that Viv's going to take us through, but fundamentally it's one of our biggest examples of trying to do something differently and a demonstration, I suppose, by IGB of that long-term commitment that won't happen tomorrow, but the benefits of working in that way will be significant. I suppose from my perspective in that of our sector, I think we've been clear for some time, and perhaps Sean did allude to what we're talking about here is an entire reform of how we deliver or do what we do and create the space in our communities that's needed around this community agency for health, which is the whole part of the population health framework. We're in ongoing conversations to do that. But we're really in a position, without spending too much time harking back, we've talked about it a lot, but we're in a position where actually this would have been much easier because the reforms we needed a decade ago. And actually the reality is because we didn't do it then because we're hoping more money would come, and every year we're still hoping someone somewhere is going to bring more money. We're actually in a really difficult situation. Our sector is very much in the view of reform is the only way to do this better. If we're only going to look at cuts, we're actually not changing the community needs, we're not changing the healthcare needs, we're not changing the community environments. And I think that the challenge we have in some of our spaces, as I've said before, D&G is very good at a partnership space. We've got a partnership for all, but the IGB alone can't make a change to this, won't improve population health, won't increase community-led services, for example. The council in its wider sense has work to do in reforming how the council operates, the NHS board similarly, and other public bodies need to do that. And that's what will free up the ultimate resources for us to genuinely say, what do we want to prioritise and what don't we? And I'm being very careful to do this through my third sector lens and not give any other perspective. But I suppose the bit that I will always come back to, and I've talked about since sitting in this boat from the outset, is there's between 25 and 30 million pounds ring fenced in what we would see as health and social care in the third community and voluntary sector that's not public money. And actually what the sector's been very open to say is, let us all come round the table and get the best use of our collective resources. Historically, what has happened is the partnership, the partners come first. What do health want to do? What do the council want to do? And what we might ask others to pick up. That conversation's long gone. If we don't have the resources to be able to work in that way, and I think the only way of really driving forward the change that we need and the community responses we need are things like the alliance model, for example. So I suppose if I was in a position to directly respond to some of the vote members' questions about how do we get there, actually the only way to get there is not about just more savings, because that won't improve lives at all. It needs to be on reform, and I think the signal I would give is the investment of time and energy that's good, and I'm looking over at there, but there are other people in the team to get this strategic alliance off the ground. Also matches with Sean's point, which is actually we probably will in the medium term need to invest in more capacity on that kind of work and reform, because what we're asking people to do is the same colleagues, including leadership colleagues and colleagues who are delivering care, to deliver what you do every day, to think about new ways of working and to reform, and that's not sustainable. The same people can't do all of that work at the same time. So I suppose I'm just putting back on record, our sector is absolutely there ready to have the conversations, but they're not just about the alliance, which is the biggest thing we're doing, they're also in the wider council conversations of all the services, the wider NHS delivery of services, and I think that's when the bigger picture comes together. We're kind of boxed in an IGB, in my view, would be in the scope of what we can decide in here. The IGB is one of those partnerships that actually is committing to doing something differently, but it will need all partners around the table to do it in all the other spaces in order to realise the fullest of benefits. But yeah, from a financial perspective, let's stick there. We've got access to £25 million worth of resources already in our community that people are saying, let's join up to do that better. And as we'll talk about in the strategic lines, there's a partnership view and saying there are more opportunities to get external investment. It's not about public money, but it's about community investment money. And I think if we can keep an eye there and be brave about sticking to that space, I think we will actually start to realise the reforms that we need, which will widen up the public pressures on public services and money over time. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, and I think it goes back as well to what Andy was saying, that the third sector provides a lot more. Third sector is used to squeezing not just the pounds but the pennies. So I think, that is probably where we can shift a lot of the the outputs, like get more outputs for your pounds basically over time. And we will come to that discussion when we go to the next agenda item as well. I think one thing we probably haven't touched on yet, and there have been a lot of conversations, I take you in with them in a second. One of the things I think as an IJB, and you're correct, as well, wider partners as well, we need to be very careful that we don't save a pound somewhere that costs £2 somewhere else. And that is something that is often happening because, if we are only looking what we can cut, it might create other costs and that won't help any of us. So I think we need to try, especially in the IJB space, because this is our opportunity to work together, and we need to try and not just look at the silos, because even the budget, even finances are done in silos. And to realize the changes that we want, but also find some savings that we need to look beyond those silos and try and work collaboratively to make it work. I would say. Sorry, go on, please come in.
Yeah, thank you. I was just trying to bring us back to the directions and the budgets that get placed against them. I guess in my simple head, what happens is that the partner looks at those directions and comes back with, this is how much it costs. This is a quote, an estimate. And as you said, Sean, when you add them all up, it's going to be greater than the budget that we have. So that prompts a need, I guess, for us to review the spec, the direction to bring it back into budget, or strategically we need to make a conscious decision that we are going to overspend. And we don't seem to ever make the strategic decision to overspend into the world of prevention and early intervention 3 years out, not 10 years out. And until we do that, we're just going to get more and more difficult. So it's how we have visibility of that and get to a point where we can make those key decisions that perhaps we should have made 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but we definitely need to make them today.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think possibly, Sean, it goes back to what we discussed before, that this year we have very strict saving targets that we need to meet, but we also want to do that transformation. So I think as an IJB, we need to again decide about what are those brave steps that get us to where we want to be, and we need to be brave, because no matter what we do, if we don't make those brave decisions today, 10 years down the line, it won't be us at the table, but somebody will probably complain about what we didn't do today. So I think we need to get into that space of actually, making that change happen, otherwise it won't happen. And I know we don't necessarily have all of the answers, but I think just, trying to get us into that, the thinking about that brave step that is needed training is really important. Okay, I'll close the discussion here, because I think we've had lots of good discussions. Sean, there is quite a few asks you have in regards to your paper. Do you want to quickly talk us through that, or?
Yeah, I'll just go down them after the recommendation. So it's ask the board to note the overspend of £13.2 million on the NHS side, the reasons by this, and the funding model for meeting that £13.2 million. Ask the board to note the overspend of £9.5 million, the reason for the overspend related to the service delegated by the local authority. Note, which we haven't actually mentioned, that there are £2.7 million of reserves which are fully committed and built into the plans already for next year. A big chunk of them sit in the acute side, which is no longer in the integration scheme. But hopefully the use of these will help us move forward and where we need to get to. Know that a £13.2 million payment was transferred from the NHS board to the IJB, includes additional financial support provided to the NHS by the Scottish Government for 25-26, forming part of financial support package for the overall Dumfries and Galloway NHS. Note that an additional payment of £9.5 million has been requested from the Dumfries and Galloway Council to support the year-end overspend position line and integration scheme. That's been approved by Council last week in the Economic and Resources Committee. All numbers are draft, subject to external audit scrutiny of both budgets and IGB accounts, which is the next paper. Note the very challenging financial 26-27 position and previously agreed savings plans from both funding partners. And the one approval is approve the arrangement set up by local authority for the application of the £2.8 million being made available to support the IGB's approved adult social care savings plan, which will be considered on Thursday at full council, and to support the IGB to return the delegated social work budget back to a financially sustainable level. I have to give my assurances to the head of finance before Thursday's meeting for that one, so I'm hoping we can get that approval.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Ian, do you have a question?
No, so I think spot on, as far as I'm concerned, maybe a proposal, but as far as I'm concerned, the recommendations as written in Sean Van One, noted and agreed, but it's beyond. So that conversation we've had, if we leave it at that, and it's lost in the ether, it's gone. So took a couple of votes, so actually, should we agree to receive a report in regard to prevention, direction, so on and so forth, whether that answers to subject plan for Arts Commissioning, where it comes back to IGB, let's, if we can agree that, if we can bolt that onto this, let's do it. And I got the governance answer the question, but no fully anywhere near to what I think it could be picked up in the training for the new members, other members come in, but there is a governance issue there. Because we're setting the budget, it's not being adhered to by the two authorities. We need to be holding them accountable in a proper manner, and I agree entirely that we do that in the right way, in the best, and we have done that historically. And the point about reform, yeah, we spoke about reform, I don't know, the last 3 years in particular, like I said, I've got a gap here, you could say, but I'm coming back and trying to pick up. But if we could pick them up, ideally, I'd like to agree to receive a report in regards to the prevention and how directions may well affect them to whatever committee that's appropriate to. The governance issue could pick up through the training side, and the reform, I think that should be picked up one way or another, whether it's in regards to an additional, this is the finance report, might not be best sitting here in regards to an additional recommendation here, but at least you and I should take it to action. I would say that we'd put it on the agenda as some committee somewhere, if that's okay and appropriate. Then that way, at least what we discussed is got some kind of momentum and movement involved.
No, absolutely. I was going to come back.
Yeah, so just kind of clarifying the ask around that, is that there's a look at how could the direction be better informed to maximise prevention, or is it actually that you put into the directions for each of them that the report back needs to include what preventive activities have been undertaken? Because I actually think that maybe a first step would just to be put in those directions, and then whatever report it comes to, that each service, and I don't quite know how this would pan out, but in these reports that come in relation to the direction, there's a clear section that says this is a preventive activity that has been progressed and is being taken forward. You could see what comes back from that and then take it from there, rather than have another paper that says what are the options are.
So it's not really that, but thanks for bringing that up. That's your perception. For me, it's looking back, it's almost like the armed forces budget, but government's looking at movement is 2%, is 5%, is 6%, is if we're at 0.001% at the moment in regards to preventative work, should we move to 0.5, 0.1, 1%? But again, I want to see it at strategic level, what the options are and what difference that will make in regards to the preventive health of the local area. And well, that's what you asked earlier, but Grace was, I thought she was bringing that up. What does that, and does it bring savings too?
So can I just come in the preventive spend piece? So there is work that Scottish Government have led on looking at preventive spend. It is incredibly complex to do, and the NHS have been involved in a pilot looking at some of that, to see how we do that, as have other boards. So actually quantifying preventive spend is at a very, very early stage. So I don't quite think that we're where the IGB are maybe wanting to get to in terms of that, but I think we started the journey in relation to that. And that is something that the NHS have got to continue exploring, this preventive spend, and how do we embed this as we move forward. in terms of could we do that right now? There's not the mechanisms to actually do that, to give you a baseline to say we're spending this amount now, and the plan is to increase it. I think that'd be a really good place to be. But you need to have a robust baseline.
Yeah.
First of all, we don't have that yet.
So it goes back to, it's not just NHS.
Yeah.
Council, it's
It's
subsectors
Yeah.
across the whole piece, that the whole partnership potentially, which there, it's not just for NHS, well, and again, that's where clearly your focus is, because that's where your expertise lies. So I would, I'm not lay by any means, but I would like to understand at a high level strategic, okay, if all partners are working together, how does this best affect the IGB budget, not an NHS budget, a council budget, perhaps even the third sector in there somewhere. So it's a kind of start of that for me. So no,
So,
I wouldn't want to
for
tie.
us as a report, because I'm not sure, that is happening right now, because we don't have the data and the thing for that. So can we,
What the council do.
Donna, sorry, looking back at you and Kirsty, in regards to directions, I think the points that Val just made is really good, that we need to ask for some sort of feedback from everybody, and then just like we ask for financial governance, we ask, if for everybody to find savings, we should probably ask everybody what they're doing in the longer view strategically to reduce, and also to work on early intervention and prevention as well. So that might be something to try and work into that, if that's okay. And I know we already gave you a sign off earlier, but just to change that slightly again, if that's all right.
Yeah, we're currently working on our developing our reporting process at the moment, so absolutely we can build that in.
Perfect, that would be great, because I think that's a really good first step to get more data, but also to change the focus of all of the directions, basically. And then as a second point, we do have some workshop time set apart still going forward. So if we take this away as an action, to not lose the conversation we just had, and to actually further develop it in a workshop for now, rather than asking for a report, and then you can look in detail how the whole system can work together, how we can ensure that, that one spend doesn't, or that one saving doesn't create another spend, and so on, and how we can shift things and find that brave spot where we can potentially tackle things. That might be a good approach to do that, and we'll take it away as an action to offline see how we best plan for that, if that's all right. Does that work in?
I suppose the patch at the minute, and so I need to look at that flag and see exactly what's needed. As long as we see that in a minute, then at least it's a starting point. We start to drive it forward. So it ends up that'll be a workshop. Let's see, and from the workshop we potentially say, listen, we do want to see the report.
Yeah.
Or listen, you can what as a stand, we'll have struck by the Scottish Government and Council and as well. So let's just keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's no, I think.
Oh no, we can't keep doing what we're doing, absolutely. But I think we capture it in the minutes, and we'll capture it as an action as well, and we'll take it offline to arrange something going forward. Sorry,
I'm sure you want to move on. So I just wanted to kind of note the complexity around that preventative spend in an individual's kind of service area linked to a direction. In that some of that preventative spend may well be somewhere else. So it certainly would be helpful for people to bring forward thoughts around if money was spent anywhere else, that could have a benefit as a prevention, not just about that particular service area's spent.
Absolutely. I think what I would like us to do at some point, and we will have to chat offline about that, but I think it would be really nice to, as part of the conversation, to almost start with a clean slate, because right now we don't. We start with all of the things that are existing, but if they weren't existing, how would we create a system that actually works? And then maybe that can trigger what we need to change as well. Because right now we are tied to what's already there, and we are tied to what savings we need to find. So that might be the point.
So, Chair, I know you want to close that. I want to the recommendations. I suppose that I'm kind of with Valerie in terms of there's a bit of a discovery. People are still trying to go through the process of understanding. There's a huge risk of preventative spend for me that actually it needs to be intentional. So you need to be saying that we're intentionally investing this and these resources with this work in order to avoid X. If you open the floodgates to what incidentally might be preventative, you'll find that somebody's reporting that 60% of your budget's on preventative because you'll add in a bit of transport, a bit of physical activity, a bit of everything else. For me, prevention needs to be about the intention of the partnership to stop happening or to make things better or to create better conditions. I think if the general request is show me what prevention looks like, people will scramble around to find incidentally what might be preventative, when in fact that wasn't the intention. So I'm kind of in that space of my view would be that if you're wanting to count preventative spend, it should be about the things you've intentionally invested in and the outcomes and impact you're expecting to see, not just a collection of lots of stuff. And I think that's where NHS is kind of is struggling as well, because the definition of what is preventative spend, both on an incidental basis and an intentional basis, is quite complicated to do, and it's probably something you're not really going to get an agreed definition of. But I suppose from our perspective, and again from our sector perspective, there's a general view that if you invest in communities and that's all preventative spend. It's actually not, as we've discovered in our commissioning plan, because actually the investment from here into the sector has mostly been delivering services. It's not really been so. Everybody around the room will have a slightly different view of early intervention prevention, but my input would be, let's give an intention. This is what we intend to avoid or to make better, and that's our definition of preventative spend almost.
That's a really good point, and I'm sure Donna can make notes already. I see. She's swimming away. So definitely, make sure that is part of it, and that's a very good point actually, because I think it's nice if things happen accidentally, but we are a strategic body, and as a strategic body, we have to have the intention woven throughout. So absolutely, thank you. Okay, I'm going to close this topic. So we've noted everything and we've approved everything you asked us to do, Sean. So thank you very much for presenting that item. And we'll go over to item number 9 and we remain with you, Sean.
Okay, thank you. So I just quickly point out a couple of errors which are totally on me. Item of the cutting and pasting here. 1.1 and 2.1, where it says 23-24, it should be 25-26 and 31st of March 2026. So apologies for that. This paper is in accordance with the local authority Accounts Scotland Regulation 2014, which state we have to bring forward the draft accounts to the integration board for sending to the auditors, external auditors, for the 30th of June, and to put out in the public domain 21 days of consultation. The auditors will then audit them and come back, and we bring them back on the 22nd of September IJB for formal sign off. So this is this is our annual accounts with most of it's not actually finance related. It's how we feel we've performed and delivered, and Chief Officer, Chair of IJB, myself have fed into that, and teams behind the scenes feel the accounts fall. So I'm just looking for approval that these are okay to send off for external audits to go through them, do their part, and also I think it's 1st of July, 21st July, we put in the public domain for perusal.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, we do need to publish it obviously, and there are quite important deadlines so that we meet a regulatory guidance there as well. So we need to make sure that happens. Can I ask, does anybody have questions or comments or reflections before we go to the approval? Yeah.
No questions. Happy to move to approve as per the recommendation.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions or comments, anything from anybody? No, in that case, we are happy to approve.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Sean. That one was a quick one. Okay, in that case, I'd say, sorry, I know it says on the agenda we're taking a lunch break now. I don't think we are, because we are running ahead. So I think we continue with the agenda and we'll probably finish before lunch anyway, because there isn't a lot left on the agenda. Does anybody want a short break, or are we happy to continue? Yeah, happy to continue. That's fine. Thank you. So item 10 is the next agenda item, which is a commissioning towards a strategic alliance. And that paper is being presented by Whip and also Rebecca, who I believe is has joined online. Hello, Rebecca. Welcome, and hello, Whip. Over to you too.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And we've been kind of thrilled, haven't we, through your finance conversation. So no pressure to be on where we want to take this. So so great to have Becky here too. I suppose the paper I was asked to do was just to provide an update on where we were and in terms of the process of moving towards that strategic alliance that you approved that we do in December. So that paper sort of sets out the kind of nuts and bolts and where we are through procurement, which is why with Becky is here and obviously helped considerably in putting that together. So I'm hoping that folks have read that and found that helpful. I have had a couple of questions in advance when I think the papers have come out. So I hope it's helpful. I've put together a few slides because the main question was, okay, well, what does success look like for this? And where does that take us? So I'm really happy to take questions on the whole entire thing, but I wonder if just going through these slides might be a helpful kind of context around that from there. What I wanted to say, first of all, was that this is sort of one part of a bigger delivering change programme, and alongside, you know, all the stuff that you've heard Gareth talk about around shifting left towards prevention, early intervention, and the kind of community-led approaches that are in there. So it's only one part of where that is, and I know that Alan has mentioned a couple of times the work that we're doing. In terms of the timelines, which was another question that we've been asked, and Becky can probably speak to this a little bit more in a sec if folks want more than that, but we reckon that overall it will take us about 18 months to get to a point where we're at the start of a strategic alliance. This kind of PSP approach is very much about that kind of market engagement, understanding what's their design and knowing that we want to move forward and doing that in a collaborative way with our partners across our sector and in community. So there's lots of work going on there. So I'm hopeful that by the end of this calendar year, we will be much closer to having been moving towards putting forward our procurement and whatever. So we're doing lots of work with our partners, and I've actually got a PSP management team meeting tomorrow with our sort of main partners, and we've got another stream of this which is specifically around supporting unpaid carers. So if we start here with then about what success looks like. So I've tried to do this across just 3 different themes really about what it means for people, what it means for finance, and what it means in terms of service. So we know, and I've described in the paper, that this is a kind of well established approach to commissioning, although we've not moved in this way. There's lots of work has been done in lots of other areas around the country that have looked at this beyond just Scotland, and lots of narrative around where that is. So I'm hoping that provides a bit of assurance that it's a recognised and valid and evidenced approach that we're taking. And what, in terms of what that means for people, it very much speaks to, when I think about the strategic commissioning plans that as an integration joint board you've developed, and I've had the joy of supporting you in writing, this is exactly what we've been talking about in our strategies since in the beginning of integration, where people, and the sort of purpose, I suppose, of integration around that is that people are experiencing support that's easier to access, more joined up and focused on what matters to them, and therefore that's leading to better outcomes for people. And I guess when I was thinking about that, it is about that kind of preventing crisis, which again, if you think about strategic commissioning intentions, all of these things are described within there. So this is an approach that delivers this sort of these sorts of outcomes. The connections to communities is a really strong one, and if you remember when we were looking at Right Care, Right Place and around the work that we were doing there, that was a really strong message from our communities in Dumfries and Galloway about how important it was for them to be connected to their local communities and how that supported their well-being. So I've put there the kind of, I'm not planning to read all of it for you because I'm sure these will be shared Amber afterwards, but I wanted to kind of recognise that these are the sorts of better outcomes that we would expect for people. And what I did was I've had a look at some of the evidence from other places and whatever, and tried to give a couple of examples around this about what this means for folk. So even just within, we've already started, as you know, doing some work around community-led prevention, looking at early intervention. So in Dumfries and Galloway, through the community assessment and community appointment days that we're doing around MSK and looking at those waiting lists and supporting that huge input from our sector partners, our community groups, and we've already seen there's only been, I think, 4 or 5, but from one particular, the last one I went to, there was, I had nothing to do with it, but the one that I went to, there was of the people who came, 48 people were seen that day by physio, and 84% of people told the teams when they were asked in their evaluation that this fully met their needs, and there was only 18 out of those 48 people on that waiting list that needed to go on and have any further health appointment in terms of that, because it was around physical activities, it was about getting access to some of those other things. In our Galloway Butte, where they did some work around physical activities, and of course we've got our local active lives for Dumfries and Galloway, and in our Galloway Butte they called that their sort of healthy options was their way, and they reported that there was 17% fewer GP appointments through one of the GP practices that they were monitoring and working with, and 26% fewer unscheduled care appointments over that sort of time period that they had, which was around, that was about a year or so into their programme. And in Plymouth, which are my kind of heroes currently, they're about year 10 in their strategic alliance and have an amazing kind of annual report. We're looking at their annual report most recently, and we can maybe share that with you too to kind of get some real case studies. But what they're seeing there is that they've got people around homelessness and around alcohol and drug issues that are very much more moving towards that independent living and that peer-to-peer work that they've got around innovations, interventions, leadership and recovery. So we're already starting to see that it means that there's less of a role for the statutory sector and even the third sector within that, because actually this is about communities within themselves. So it's hugely impressive work that they've done. And I guess just thinking, and I think Donna's come back in, so Donna's back in the room, there's a piece of work that we're doing around what are going to be some of the measures that we want to look at for this strategic alliance. So I'm kind of just hinting, just as I was sitting thinking about this for here, is to kind of put what are some of the things that we want to look at, because it's not going to be all about the numbers, it's not going to be all about how many widgets or how many people we've seen or whatever, but actually about what the impact is having on people. So we would want to be making sure that we're doing that. So alongside that, and we're going to work with our PSP members and other stakeholders to think about that. One of the key parts that we're looking at through this initial period, so we can bring that into the line. Next slide, please, Amber. So this next one, if I focus in and around the finance, and again looking for the research evidence of whatever that's around there, not research evidence, but evidence of what's actually been done. It is about finance and resources being used much more effectively. So avoiding, Ian, the kind of, I think it was yourself or Andy actually talking about that kind of waste and where we're looking at that, because we think about our fishes in delivering change, about us all moving in that same direction. So again, what I've tried to do is give a bit of an example there of some of the greater values that we can see about that shifting our efforts away from the crisis response towards prevention and early intervention. We're losing or reducing duplication, which again, these are things that were all in the very first strategic commissioning plan in 2016. So we've got, these are things we've talked about for a long time. They're the reasons you put them into your strategies, but this is now looking at how we're going to try and get so excited about it. But this is now is actually looking to put that money where your intention has been and moving this forward in this way. And one of the key things I think for us is about how we use the statutory sector funding differently, the budgets that Sean is talking to you about. How do we use that differently to leverage supports and investment from other sources? So if you look at the Plymouth again, but that little slide at the bottom, so the dark blue, this is over the last 6 years of what they've been doing for a particular area of work around homelessness. And what you're seeing there is that the dark blue is the amount of investment from the statutory sector, and the kind of greeny colour is how much investment is coming from other places. So overall, over their 6 years, what they've done is they've moved external funding from 730,000 to 5 million over that 6 years. So where that the funding that Alan's talking about, that 25 million that's invested in health and care within the third sector, but not from the health and social care partnership, that has moved, if we look at that one for this particular type of service, that's moved from 730,000 to 5 million over 6 years. Now, I'm not guaranteeing it will get, but you know, it just shows you the scale of what's possible, and actually the learning that I've been doing about how actually the way that we commission and how we commission a service rather than supporting the organisations, that limits how much our third sector partners are able to attract and secure funding from elsewhere. So there's all sorts of things that, with the best of intention, we've been doing within the statutory sector. Right, well, we'll commission a service and we'll determine what it is, but actually by shifting this to be much more collaborative and be much more responsive to what communities are telling us, we are absolutely going to be able to attract funding from other sources across the sector. And our colleagues in TSDG are doing lots of work through that, through the DG Invest or Invest DG, I get them round on me, and sort of there. And then if we also look at that closer to home in Ayrshire, it's really interesting around care and support at home, was looking at real challenges across their rural areas. So actually looking at micro enterprises where it's maybe just one or two people who within a community are happy to look at do that, and how can we work with our existing care and support at home partners to support those micro enterprises to be able to do that. So it's almost addressing some of that workforce challenge and around that from there in a different way in terms of doing that. And what you're seeing here is that they're seeing through that the 89 people in rural areas that are being supported by these micro enterprises, that they're delivering care for 89 people, and that 34,000 is being reinvested. So the cost of that care is then being reinvested into those local communities, and by kind of alongside that then is securing work for people and potentially a family, bringing folks into that, and it is getting into that kind of wider economic stability that we want to look at from there. So again, thinking about some of the active, the kind of impact measures, again, looking at there will be very clearly, I would hope, I'm sure we're going to see much more in terms of the external investment into Dumfries and Galloway from out with the, and we will become, as the Health and Social Care Partnership, just one of a number of investors in the Strategic Alliance, which also means that we will only be one of the decision makers around on that too, because actually the decision making is happening within will happen within the Strategic Alliance, so that takes you closer to being led by the communities, etc. as well. So that's the financial piece. So the next one, Amber, is around services. So in that, what we've talked a lot about already about things being coordinated as a system rather than a collection of separate organisations, where we know that people's experiences that they get bounced from one organisation to another, one department to another, where that is, there's not a lot of joined up. So that collaboration is very much a kind of, it's quite a cultural shift for our partners and our departments and our own teams, but we're already starting to see some real impact around that, as I mentioned, around the community assessment days, etc. And within the wider communities, the locality hubs that the third sector Dumfries and Galloway coordinate, which brings together the ward officers from the council, public health improvement colleagues from NHS and the third sector Dumfries and Galloway alongside those communities. There's collaboration that's happening in that space, and that's where the change is really happening. So this is about following their lead really and being able to enable and support them. And again, this is talking about people's involvement and participation. That there's a lot of work that I'm doing in the background just now about how are we really going to do that? And we're talking with organisations that you'll be aware of, like the Stove and What We Do Now network, who are very much involved in that space. We're talking to Harry Hay and the thriving communities within the local authority, Kirsty Peedham, who I'm sure many of you know did so much of that work around community coordination and development through COVID and bringing that together. So we're not sticking just within health and social care, as Alan was talking about. It's about that wider thing. And Valerie obviously chairs the senior leadership team for the community planning partnership. So those kind of conversations are going into there as well. And we're working quite closely with the place planning partnership about looking at how we do this in place, so that it's very much around the communities and is linking into all of that stuff as well. So while this is about, and that's what I'm saying, this is just one small part of a much wider piece of work that will be informed, and we're preparing it to be ready to deliver on what comes out of all of those conversations and all of that work. So again, just thinking about what success looks like and the impact for that, if we think about from the service perspective in South Ayrshire around some of the work, not just around the metro systems, but in other work that they were doing around commissioning slightly differently or working more collaboratively, they saw a 20% reduction in their work, in their social work caseload, which it would be, I'm sure our social work colleagues would be delighted to get any kind of reduction in that, as would the people that are in that premier. And within Scottish Borders, there that wee graph that's there that I'm sure you've seen before when I've talked to you, is about that they reduced the waiting list for social work and OT over the course of 18 months really significantly. And if we kind of correlate that with what our experience is in the community appointment days that we've seen in Anna, then, and that, you know, kind of that less than half of the people who came along to that needed to want to be on that waiting list. So we're starting to see some of that happening, and it's gathering momentum. And then I just wanted to, just on the very last slide, Amber, just to see that although this is a paper and a presentation and a discussion about commissioning, it's not about a new contract. That's not where our success is going to lie. It's going to be in all the things that you've spoken about what's going to support the financial position. It's about making sure that we're making that measurable and sustained, I suppose, shift towards preventative, person-centred system where people are experiencing better outcome, about our partners, communities and partnership work collectively, and our resources have created impact, which is really all of the things that you've been talking about. It's an IDB since it's infused came into being all those years ago when none of us have aged a day, of course. But you know, this is really one of the key ways, and I think Alan's point earlier about this is a really, talking about being brave, this is a really brave decision about sustaining, maintaining the investment in the sector here in Dumfries and Galloway to enable us to work in this way, to enable us to look at this differently. And hopefully, Gary keeps saying it, if things don't look any different in a year, then we've not quite got that, we've not done it right, we've not got there. But this is really, if we all get behind this and can support our colleagues in our communities to get behind this, it's going to feel really differently for Sean's annual report next year. Maybe we'll be starting to see that shift in, and things will feel different for people, I would suggest. And so one part that I hope bringing a little bit of hope and optimism to there, and Becky and I are very happy to take any questions, and I can share as much of the evidence and references and background reading and all of that you want to have. It's great. I have a great time sitting with reading through all of that and really thinking about how we can do that in Dumfries.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for preparing everything, and also because I know a lot of work has gone into this, obviously, and a lot more work is going to go into it as well. So I'm happy to open it up to the room for questions and comments.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, it really does. It sort of picks up on a lot of what we've already said today, just never mind the previous meetings and such like. And I think that where it's about bringing the services together, we tend to think that we do want partnership, and I think we try to as best we can. But I think anything that encourages that more structured is better. And I think the recent opening of the Burns House is a really good example where we're putting the patient, the person who's receiving the service at the centre of it, and we're bringing people together to do that. And this to me just seems like an extension of that. It seems like a really good way of actually engaging people, making them feel like they're part of the solution rather than just the problem. And hopefully it will really rock on and we'll get really good results from it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. So we need a fifth bullet point to know that recreation has eased the day in the last year. Yes.
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, that would be lovely.
But that's the point I was going to make. So the general scenario, I'm looking at the other details here in the fact. So I'm looking at noting the procurement bullet point through the recommendations and the process set out. I've got a local day centre whiteboard, which you're aware of what that day centre is. And it's one of the, it might be the only one, or it might be a number of them, which is sure that delivers registered services. It's that to do that. So it's moved to its next stage flag line. It's chosen to do that. But it's almost like a limbo year. So I think when it comes to being able to access the delivery of self-direct support option 3, it's blocked because it's got to undertake a year's services and work before the care inspector come in, carry it on and say, right, okay, you then get onto that public contract framework to be able to deliver them services or them to get referred to in the first place. I see that as being a bit of an inhibitor. I'm on the right track when I'm saying that. Is there anything we could do about that at all or not?
That's I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the care inspector and how that goes. I think even the option 2 within the SDS kind of is where we get, so they're absolutely able to do that. To be commissioned, we've got a process. I don't know off the top of my head if Andy Centre is on that and doing that through SDS option 2, but I'm happy to take it away and have a look. But what that enables them to do is that access and funding, and they do that way. To be able to do that, we've just got a due diligence thing that we do internally to make sure that they can do that. So I can pick that up and see that they would be funded through SDS option 2, but I don't think there's anything I can do about the care inspector in terms of that time it takes. It does take a bit of time to be able to move through that.
And I want that across to Sean, because it wasn't much the care inspector. I understand then getting the processes, due diligence, but the procurement process, or even if it's I'm not sure if it's Becky either. But there's a procurement process that inhibits it. I didn't think that could be changed. That's what I was thinking.
I think we can look into it.
Can I just come in? Is that okay, Viv? Thanks, Ian. So I think I know exactly which one you're referring to, and I have seen it come through in terms of that SDS option 2 request. And I think the commissioning team were looking at the kind of due diligence of that. I think the element you're talking about is perhaps the framework for care at home, which is a Scotland Excel led national framework, which there is a process to join that. Unfortunately, we are working closely with Scotland Excel at the minute in terms of reviewing that, and there's quite a bit of work going on at the minute between our procurement service, commissioning and Scotland Excel. So definitely one we can take away. Care at home hasn't formally formed part of this PSP at this point, but it's something that looking at care at home options in the future definitely wouldn't rule it out. But we can definitely take that away as a bit of an action, and I can just double check where that is in terms of the option 2 piece, which sits a little bit separate to that national framework.
Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And for me, I completely support the direction of travel. I mean, I think for me, strategic alliance is almost all what we've been talking about this morning. And this really brings it all together beautifully. And I think Andy's point around Bairns House is a really important one. I think what's often forgotten in that is that everybody had the same shared objective about delivering the Bairns House. And I think when we've got shared objectives and we all know what the priorities are and how we're delivering that, our likelihood of success is always going to be much higher. So it's just having real clarity around what the perceived endpoint of the work's going to be.
Can I just say, actually, you've reminded me, Mark, because I wrote it down, I forgot to say, but working with our PSP partners, the colleagues that are with us, and we're starting small, we've not got all of our sector partners there yet, but working with them to really define what the purpose is of the PSP. They are very explicit in that this is about reducing or delaying the need for formal care and paid care. So it's right up there as this is absolutely what they see their role is, and that's what they are committing to do. Yeah. So it talks about it being, I'll give you the actual wording to put out within the minute, Amber, but it talks about that the PSP is committed to making sure that there's sustainable care, that the person that does that, but it says explicitly about reducing or delaying the need for formal care. So they're being very focused on where that is.
Fabulous.
Well, thank you.
Well done. And I love that you're working closely with Rebecca. It feels like a true partnership in there.
Yeah.
And that's just, like you said, what we have been hoping for a long time. And I guess, apart from noting, what is the ask to the IGB? Are you just reporting on the progress of this work me, it would be really interesting to understand you're thinking of preventing this work from not succeeding. And it's not clear in the paper. I would like to understand what would be the barriers and what we could do for that progress. And understand a bit of the timeline. When you said it got it at the end of the year has noticed any difference, I'd actually like to understand a bit more what is that we're hoping that we're going to notice. So we know that we're going with the hopes and aspirations that you've set up from the beginning. So a bit more of understanding, although, you know, the presentation is great and all of it, I would like to kind of understand it more so I can share it with others in terms of, you know, this is the way we're going and this is what we're doing. And I need you, because you talked about here about all practices and we all have different ways of working, preferred ways of working, safe ways of working. So just a bit more on that, Rebecca, you've been.
So I think, I mean, Rod is very much involved with us too within that delivering change and around where that is. And it's about getting the timing right too, isn't it? About that kind of the communication around this and about what that's going to feel like and being able to take that. And I guess we need to work at a pace with our partners too. There's a lot of that for all of us. This is unknown territory. There's a very clear process and around that from there, but there's nuances for us in Dumfries and Galloway. So in order to make it success, we're working very much from our partners, and I've got no doubt as we go forward and there are asks and whatever from the Integration Joint Board and our leadership teams and all of that kind of thing, we will be coming to you for those in terms of how we can help you to communicate that out further. I think we've been talking for a little while, haven't we, Rod, about how we do that. How do we really socialise this whole thing about delivering change, and then one small part of that. So how do we get that story? How do we take that together? And I think we've kind of had a couple of false starts, I would say, in some of it. But yeah, we want to do that in a planned way that's going to make sure that that's successful. So hopefully soon you will have something that you're able to then take. But in the meantime, if it's helpful, we can, and I guess it's that kind of summary at the end, that kind of key part. It's about what we're doing and trying to move that the way that we're talking about. It's about we're trying now to be looking at how we are actually physically going to change our system to deliver on the strategic commission plan. It's about how we're going to do that. That's the kind of key parts, I think. And it's still very early days. We've only been at this formally with our partners, and actually we've been really praised by our partners. Some of our provider partners are national organisations that have been involved in PSPs elsewhere, and they are really welcoming the fact that we are starting with such a blank sheet of paper with them, that we're not doing like we always have done within commissioning, and where we've already got it designed and we're only asking people what colour they want it. They're very much, but that takes a little bit of time, Gracie, to get that. But yes, that will be forthcoming, and I can come back and talk to you as much as you like about how far we've got and what we're doing. But yeah, we're in that. And I think we've just at the last meeting that we had with our PSP partners, there's been a bit of a shift getting that. We've got that kind of purpose now. Tomorrow we're going to be spending a bit of time looking at what do we think within our short, medium and long term outcomes are going to be. What are the things that we're doing? We're going to be looking at with those partners. What are the activities that they are currently undertaking, that they're currently commissioned for, that meet that purpose, and which are the ones that are not? What are we leaving behind? What do we want to take with us? Where is that? I have got a list as long as my arm about other organisations that we've got that I think would be really amazing for us to bring into the PSP. But again, we can't be running before we walk. So there's a little bit of kind of going at a pace that means that everybody's coming with us, which is that collaborative piece. No sense that we want something, even if we can just do something that's a wee introduction, even just about where we are, that we can share out with people to share wider, that would be helpful. Thanks, Grace.
And then I'm going to please.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, although I suppose just to comment, the PSP idea is relatively new. There's been significant work coming up for 2 years to get this off the ground. And I suppose just linking to our previous finance and investment conversations, all this work has been done on top of the business as usual. so there's no new resource, no new people in, and this isn't just a change of commissioning, which you can say fits neatly. It's a completely new way of thinking. So the fact we've got these ambitions and we're agreed on where we want to head, and we are being brave about it, I think said a lot about the people who are already working in that space to want things to be different. I think what's interesting, and Viv's mentioned that there is, maybe we have been so ambitious that we've tripped ourselves up a few times. I've actually tried to do 2 or 3 things at the same time. But actually what's been great about it is as soon as partners have said, actually, I'm not quite ready, I need an extra bit to move here, actually we've been flexible enough and been able to stop and rearrange, and that's part of this working process. It's in stark contrast, albeit it's all done for the right reasons. And Becky and Viv, I've talked about this before, is about sometimes the drive for best value, commissioning, protection of public money, all the things that are right to do. The unintended consequences, we talked about other things earlier on, have actually driven some restrictions, as Viv says, and sort of what other third sector organisations have been able to done for their other investments, because investors are not going to invest in an organisation that looks like an underfunded public service. So although all the intentions were right to shape public services and invest in the sector and all that was done well, actually we've not been able to maximise the potential of that, taking a different approach, which is still scrutiny and good governance of investing in public money, but doing it in a collective way, allows everyone to bring their resources to the table, and that's actually where you're going to start to realise some of the savings and some of the greater investment overall, which we really welcome. But I suppose the point I would say, Chair, and again, and to kind of board members about this idea of being brave, I think to Grace's point, we've got a lot of things on the list already, so we probably don't need agreement to do any more quite yet, to your point. I think we need to just regroup on what that first year's look like and our successes and progress would be the next step from my perspective. What should come from the room hopefully today is an endorsement of this, and an emphatic endorsement of this approach. I think will help colleagues just keep on with their ambitions. I don't think we need anything else kind of particular proof today, but a wee bit of confidence after going through kind of probably 6 months of what felt like really hard work will be a great response today. But I think the overall approach, I suppose, is my reflection from board members about how we invest. This is just what we've been talking about today, which is a completely new way of doing something different. It's built entirely on trust and on relationships and a sense of collective leadership. So this is the sector and independent organisations and the public bodies coming together to trust each other, to take our share of delivering good outcomes. They're not underpinned by contracts per se, although some will still need a contract depending on what we're delivered. It's built, to Mark's point, on this sense of this is what we want to achieve. To keep that going, my input would be it does need resource. So the wee bit of worry that I do have is we run out of steam. It's so ambitious that we run out of steam of doing the day job and doing this transformation, and that's something I do think honestly we'll need to come back to this space. Another ask, Grace, to your point about it will need some additional resource, in my view, to get it over this significant design phase, if that makes sense. And without that, I think the risk that needs to be considered is we run out, so the people who are in the room run out of steam and run out of energy just to get that over some of the significant milestones. But I just wanted to put on record my thanks to colleagues for going through such a hefty process. It's been 2 years in the making, and to have partners around the table ready and willing to do something different, I think it's an incredible achievement. And between Viv and I, we're probably floating around Scotland at some point every week talking about it, because actually there's other models, other people who, even the commitment that we've made, there's other people seeing that that's actually a completely different way of doing things, and we should all be pretty proud of.
We're just waiting for the international, aren't we?
We're not quite getting on planes yet. That's
we're waiting for that to come.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, I suppose it's really to concur with some of the points, like, this is just such a fantastic opportunity, and we do need to be brave, because actually we've become very, we do things this way, and we do, this is all the rules, and this is what we must follow. And so even moving people out of those kind of thought patterns, and we're immediately going, oh, what's the performance indicator? What's it? Oh, do you know what I mean? We're jumping in on this, and some of this is going to be organic, some of this is going to work, some of it's not, some of it's not going to work. But keeping doing things the way that we've always done them is certainly not going to work, because it hasn't worked, and we've kept doing it. And I think Alan's right, the enthusiasm and energy that Vivian and colleagues are bringing to this. I think there's lovely collaborations and different conversations happening now that I don't think would have happened a couple of years ago. But it does need that dedicated resource. It does need people to focus on this, because transforming when you're trying to keep, you know, the other bits and pieces working is really challenging. So I would just echo that. I think probably the risk might be to this is that capacity to actually, continue to take this forward and transform it as well. I think the team have done a great job today, and I think it goes to everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's just to pick up Alan's point, just to wholeheartedly endorse this piece of work and where it's got to. I think it's hugely exciting. It potentially really transformational. And my question kind of relates to that transformational piece, and then kind of looking ahead 5 years or so, and assuming that resource that we've just spoken about can be found to help support the growth of this. And my apologies if it's in the papers somewhere, but would it be that the PSP expands, or can you have multiple PSPs in a region? So going to be a PSP of place. Could you just talk a little bit about that? What the region might look like?
I think we'll kind of bring Becky in too, but I think the PSPs are really just a bridge to get us there, the kind of interim arrangement. And then what you're aiming for is that strategic alliance. And that could be around, and the exciting thing for me, I suppose, is that we don't actually know what that will look like around that. We're looking at how we do things around place to take us away from the kind of silos. That's a mental health thing, that's a carer thing, that's a physical activity thing or whatever, because that's not how people turn up, is it? There's much more about that place and community, and we know the impact around that sort of stuff. So the PSP really enables us to test, trial out, prototype different things from there, so that when we go towards the procurement around whether it's a strategic alliance, there are other ways, but we're thinking a strategic alliance is the route that we'll take. And then it could be that there are several. It could be that we decide that there's one for Dumfries and Galloway with lots of different streams underneath it. And certainly in Plymouth, that's what they've got, is they've got one overarching alliance with lots of different areas of work under it. And it really becomes a kind of entity in its own right, if you like. And we're one participant and one investor within that sort of place. So the sort of key thing is that we don't actually know, because we're developing that and together, and the PSP is just really the vehicle to enable us through that kind of very basic agreement that we're all going to work together and trust each other, and this is how we're going to behave, to be able to do that. But Becky, is there more you would say on that?
No, I was just going to add in terms of yes, you can have as many PSPs as you like as part of that kind of initial market engagement position. The way I look at it is your PSP is always like your service designing element, so it's your pre-procurement stage, I suppose, more than anything, of you are redesigning, co-designing services, piloting opportunities within the community. But as Viv said, there's been a few I've seen previously where they then have different work streams within them, so you might have one overarching and then you have the different focus work streams, and that's how I would envision that kind of strategic alliance going forward as well. But again, it's looking at actually, if you want more than one PSP, you need to then resource that appropriately to make sure that we can actually manage the outputs and the throughputs through that as well. So yeah.
And I guess the other thing to say is that we're starting, I don't know, I remember that I did a slide where we had the kind of 3 horizons, and where we had that the third sector and the PSP was very much about the learning, but our longer 5 to 10 year plan is looking at how do we do that? How do we bring that collaborative way of working much more into that includes our third sector, independent sector partners, community groups, all of that from there. So I suppose in my head, I'm saying that becomes the way that we are operating, and that's it. So even we go, we're building those collaborative, and we're already have really good relationships, don't we, in terms of with our independent sector partners and around that. But and again, that's where some of the place, and there's definitely something And that for us to explore a bit further potentially around how we do that in that place, because if you think about, we were talking about Anna and Lydia weren't we, was around, you've got the third sector organisations, you've got those, the day centre he mentioned, you've got the care and support home partners, there's the care homes. So actually if you start to look at that one place and in that community space, you start to get much more of a building on those assets, and that I'm talking about it as kind of vertical collaboration as well as the horizontal across the different sectors. And that feels much more appropriately person-centred, community-led, because it's going to be building on that there, so that, again, one of the phases Gary uses, if it's looking the same in Annan as it does in Stranraer, then it's not quite right, because actually they're different communities, they're different assets, so things should look different there. So, yeah, but we don't quite know yet, because we're still in the exploratory stage and working with colleagues to try and piece that together.
Thank you.
I think for me, one of the pleas that I would make at the early stage is to be really cognizant of the language that we're going to use when we go out there, because in order to be for a hook for the public and a hook for the third sector, things like strategic alliance, I don't think people really understand what that means and why it's important to me. You know, if it's something like, you know, the People's Alliance for Change or the People's Alliance for Improvement, then it's something that we can co-own and co-design. So it's just a bit kind of lessons that we learned in the past about how we get that engagement, how we make it real for people about this is what we're going to be called, but this is what we're going to do, and this is what your role can be.
It's really interesting, Mark, because we have had some conversations. I mean, I'm talking to so many people, can't even know if I can remember who it was, but there was that it's actually that somebody was talking about in their area where the local authorities were doing the kind of participatory budget and stuff and whatever, and they were just, we'll just call it as the people's money. It's about that from there. So absolutely, I think that will kind of come out from there and how we'll steer that and making it so there is absolutely, and actually our third sector partners in our communities, when we get into them, they're the ones that are going to keep us right on that kind of stuff. And that's again why it's so important that they're involved in that we're not pre-judging or predetermining what it's going to be. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, just to come back on Mark's point, we have been having discussions about how we take this out from the meeting today. I'm very keen that we articulate it in a way that it's understandable to people and it's relevant to them and they can actually see what it means to them, as opposed to even, you know, terms that might not be you know, immediately understandable or relevant. So we're very conscious of that.
Thanks, and on that point, I don't want to answer for the paper because it's not mine. But I suppose the point from Mark, in terms of PSPs, from our experience, we've got some experience in D&G of doing them as well. Community transports I've heard, for example, where it was time limited in order to be the mechanism in order to get people together to agree what they wanted to achieve. And now we have a new entity that was named and is working, and we've moved on from it. So I think our ambitions aren't to have 25 thematic PSPs because we'll not have time to turn up to them all for that. So that's the kind of technical language, if you will, as a mechanism, a partnership mechanism to get us to our ultimate model. And I think if we're going to get the best of all, if that makes sense, in this idea of trying not to segment too many outcomes in single pots so we're all in the same places, because we then just replicate the partnership model, and we don't really want to do that. We want a much more active learning what's working, what's not, move things around as we're in different spaces, is ultimately we want to get to. So there will need to be some governance structures around it, but the fewer contracts, the more commitment we have. That's finding that right balance. And I think, yeah, to Mark's point, we've also talked about things, we use language like PSPs and strategic. It's a strategic alliance. It's not that strategic, if that makes sense. So we know we need that strategic alliance. We'll call it whatever communities want. It's a really important point, actually, that people need to get behind. And if they think it's a system thing being done, we've not achieved our objective here, because this is a shift also from what we've talked about, place-based, which is quite a public service model, which is moving out of decentralisation into communities. This is place-led, which is a completely different beast, which is understanding the strengths already in communities and understand how you complement what's already good there, not extract from communities to build service, which is a typical service model. So it will only work, to Mark's point, if people identify that's the thing they can get behind. So the language is, I think, open for, as Rod said, is open for everyone, and it will be called whatever communities understand it to be or position. And yeah, that's a it's a complicated plan because there's a shift that's needed in from, this is a direction from here, an ambition of where to go, but at some point it needs to shift balance and be what communities want to own. There's an interesting dynamic, as I say, we don't know when, but there will become a comfortable point where we say, actually, this is genuine now place-led, community-led, we're just one of the people in the room to help things along, or yeah, when things get tough over or whatever it needs to be, we're no longer the direction of what needs to happen. And that's the ultimate prevention model, to be fair, is when it's actually already happening, whether you're there or not. That's ultimately what we want to get to. So it's an exciting place, but yeah, these are weekly conversations about what do we do and what do we call it. There's something about it that you'll just know when the shift that actually happens, you'll just feel that actually communities are back in control, and that's the ambition.
I don't think any further questions. So yeah, thank you very much, Viv and Rebecca. I think it's just to summarize, it's really exciting to see not just shifting of finances, but shifting of power. I think that's something the IJB has asked for, that should happen. So I think we are really looking forward. It's a really good project happening, and I think we are looking forward to hearing more about it. And I think it will be good to see more partners getting involved as well and having opportunities to be part of it all. But yeah, it sounds like everybody is really happy about it. So I think you asked us to note lots of things. I think we have noted them. So thank you so much for them. Sorry, Ian.
See, the fourth one, then, just when I picked up on that, so again, because I'm going to go here for a while, but I know that public report and the Fair Future Commission, and it goes on to say about resourcing. I think Alan picked up that first, but he's picked up two, this knows resource profit on the work. So when I've normally read that, we've been agreed to a further report to the IGB. Is it as it's coming back to, what's the actual?
So I guess when we as we progress through and as we start to look at if we need to go out to procurement and where it's a kind of process thing, as it's about, we'll come to you with the PSP. This is the findings of what we've got in terms of that notification, and actually we'll need to get your approval around how you move forward in that question. So with that.
So that does address all the points that we made about the resource and potential sustainability involved.
Yes, it should do. I think it's because it's wider, I suppose, Ian, than just around the resourcing around this is around the whole delivering change programme, really, because it's a whole shift in the system and about all the work that we're trying to do around making sure that we are enabling communities to take that. So that's a key part of it. So around there's the commission, Becky's already mentioned that actually capacity across what there is in terms of the procurement, what there is in terms of commissioning in order to be able to do that from there. But we don't quite know what that is yet. We're trying to, as we've seen, and I guess what I have in mind is that actually if we're able to come with some real evidence of how this is moving and how that's shifting, then that gives me a much more solid basis to say, well, actually, this is what we've delivered with this, but actually, if we had a bit more, we could do a bit more from that. So rather than using and sharing with you their information from Plymouth and Ayrshire and all those other places, is actually being able to come and say, well, this is what we've learned over the course of what we've been doing with PSP. This is what's working in that area or that place in Dumfries and Galloway. In order to be able to do that, we'll need it to be able to do it. So I guess that for me, I'm focused on what can we get that's going to start really shifting that start. So we're really starting to look at some of the shifts, but then we're able to come and see we can evidence that what we're doing and the way that we're doing it is going to merit that in addition. We're in it absolutely mindful of what Sean is talking about what he needs in terms of that kind of spend to see what around where that is and what sort of resource that might look like.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Viv and Rebecca, for bringing that, and we're looking forward to hearing more. Excellent. Thank you. Right, that takes us to item number 11, which is the IJB Participation Engagement Strategy 2026 to 2029. It's been
that was the one that we pulled.
Oh, sorry, that's true. We dropped that one. Apologies.
Yeah, we pulled that because it has to go through a local authority, the community partnership first, and then we'll bring it back through the IJB.
Absolutely. Apologies. I have one agenda where it's on and one where it's not on, so I was confused there for a second. That's fine. So we'll bring that back when we can to the IJB Dumfries, which means we're actually done and we have any other business left. So does anybody have any other business they would like to mention? I think we had quite a few good discussions today, so it's been quite good. IJB, and I think it's really nice to see all of the positive things going on. Obviously, we do have financial challenges we need to meet, but I think even there we can potentially put a positive spin on trying to take some brave actions like that aspects that we just heard about transitioning differently. So I think, if we keep that in mind and we'll work on it. The next meeting, officially IJB meeting, is on the 22nd of September, but we do have some workshops before then. So I would encourage everybody who can to attend those, because I think those are the spaces where we can really get good discussions going to enable that. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming today and enjoying. Thank you so much.
Thank you.